You're no longer family. The words still echoed, 6 years later. He had read them from a glowing phone screen. No punctuation, just finality. Just after writing the last check for the wedding florist, Daniel Voss had watched his daughter, Grace, walk down the aisle under a white floral archway that cost more than most cars. He'd paid for it all, the venue, the dress, the photographer flown in from Milan, and then vanished. Her name legally changed to her husband's surname. His number blocked. His existence erased. The pain wasn't in the money he could earn more. The pain was that she severed the only thing he'd ever built with love, family. He'd sat at that wedding and smiled like a man watching a film of someone else's happiness. He'd given the speech, toasted to her future, clapped as they danced. And days later, she was gone. And then, 6 years passed. In that time, Daniel Voss had become something else. He'd stopped apologizing, stopped wondering. He'd rebuilt his estate, his business, his life, all under one rule: never again give love to someone who weaponizes it. That Sunday, as the rain smacked the slate roof of his New Hampshire home, his security gate rang. Unknown caller. He let it go to voicemail. Then another call. Then another. The third came with a text. "Dad, please. I have nowhere else to go. I was wrong. Please open the gate." Daniel walked to the door in silence. The fire still crackled in the stone hearth. His housekeeper, Nia, watched from the hallway with quiet curiosity. He hadn't spoken Grace's name in years. He opened the heavy oak door. She was standing there, soaked in rain, mascara streaking down her cheeks like ink from a broken pen. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. "I need your help. I didn't know who else to call." He studied her thinner, paler, a shadow of the daughter he once raised. But his voice was ice. "Do I even know you?" She flinched, lips trembling. Then she looked up past Daniel and saw who stood behind him in the shadows of the hallway. Her breath hitched. Her eyes widened in disbelief. And she whispered, "No, it can't be." Because standing behind Daniel was the woman Grace's husband had tried to ruin 6 years ago. The first domino in Grace's betrayal. The true story, buried beneath weddings, wealth, and well-rehearsed lies, was about to rise from the grave. Grace's knees buckled. "Lauren," she stammered. The woman behind Daniel stepped forward, calm, composed, but unmistakably changed. Her once ash-blonde hair was now a steely black bob. Her eyes, once soft and academic, now carried a fire that Grace hadn't seen since the courtroom. "Yes, Grace," Lauren said, voice steady. "It's me." Daniel didn't move. He didn't speak. He let the moment stretch like a blade. Grace clutched the doorframe as if the wood might save her from drowning. Her mouth opened, then closed again. "I thought you left the country." "You hoped I did," Lauren said. "After your lies made sure I lost everything." Daniel stepped aside with brutal elegance. "Come in, or don't. But understand something, this isn't your house anymore. Nothing in this place belongs to the girl who spat on my name and blocked me out of her life." Grace stepped in, soaked shoes squeaking on the slate tiles. Lauren walked past her, returning to the armchair by the fire like a woman completely at home. She picked up a leather folder from the coffee table and placed it deliberately in her lap. Grace blinked. "What is this?" Daniel answered, "That's the case file. The real one. From 6 years ago. The one you helped bury." She backed away instinctively. Lauren opened it. Inside were copies of emails, bank transfers, court records, all evidence Grace had never seen, or had chosen not to. "You married a predator, Grace," Lauren said, her voice low but sharp. "And when I tried to stop him, you made sure the only person who could hurt him was destroyed instead." Grace shook her head. "I didn't know." Daniel interrupted her with quiet force. "You knew. You chose not to care." 6 years earlier, Lauren had been a whistleblower, a forensic accountant hired to investigate a construction firm laundering bribes through public contracts. Grace's husband, Landon Graves, had been one of the rising stars at Graves Development Group. Lauren had traced money through shell companies, some under names Grace herself had opened for wedding budgeting. When the story broke, Lauren's career was dismantled. Grace testified, claiming Lauren had fabricated everything out of jealousy. One anonymous tip later, Lauren was fired, doxxed, and sued for defamation. But Lauren had never stopped investigating. And Daniel had believed her. "You called me a liar," Lauren said, her voice cracking just once. "You stood on that witness stand and destroyed my credibility with a smile, while your husband made partner. And your father was cut from your life for daring to question you." Grace's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know he was using me." "You didn't care that he was," Daniel snapped. "You changed your name. You blocked my number. You said I was weak for not supporting your marriage. I built you a life. And you set it on fire for a man who turned out to be exactly who I warned you he was. Silence. Then Lauren said, so tell us. Why are you here? Grace crumpled into a chair, sobbing now. They're after me, she said. He's gone, disappeared. Left a note saying if I talk, I'm next. I think he's involved in something much bigger. There are people following me. I don't know who to trust. Daniel turned toward the fire. You don't trust the people you threw away. You beg them. She looked up at her father, desperate. I'm begging. Daniel finally faced her, the flames casting his sharp features and flickering light. Then you'll follow our rules. You will not lie again. You will not hide. And you will sit here and tell us everything you know about Landon Graves. Grace nodded slowly. But Daniel had already made a call. The line rang once before a gravelly voice answered. Voss. Tell me you've got something. I do, Daniel said. The queen's off the board. It's time we move the night. The voice on the other end laughed darkly. Good. I've been dying to come out of retirement. Lauren hadn't thought she'd see Grace again. Certainly not like this, tear-streaked, hollow-eyed, and clutching a shattered illusion like a child holding broken glass. But now that Grace was here, Lauren's old instincts had returned, sharpened by 6 years in exile. She hadn't stopped investigating after the trial. She'd simply gone underground, a whistleblower without a platform, an investigator without a badge. But she had allies. Daniel watched as Lauren spread documents across the coffee table. Grace sat hunched on the couch, trembling. She looked at the folder like it might bite her. These, Lauren said, tapping a set of forged construction contracts, are the breadcrumbs Landon left behind. He was using Graves' development to siphon municipal funds. Shell companies, ghost accounts. But last year, it got bigger. International. Daniel nodded. Cartel laundering? Lauren met his eyes. That's one theory. Another is a private intelligence firm using construction front companies to purchase real estate near military installations. I traced 3 acquisitions to sites surrounding the Joint Command facility in Quantico, all pushed through fast with zoning exceptions. Grace stared in disbelief. Landon was part of that? Lauren didn't blink. Your wedding paid for the first shell company. Daniel's voice cut the air like wire, and your testimony destroyed the one person who could have stopped it before it spread. Grace shrank into her seat, her voice almost inaudible. I didn't know. Lauren leaned forward, eyes hard. No, you didn't want to know. Daniel turned and walked toward the hallway, returning moments later with a leather case. He opened it and removed an encrypted tablet, then handed it to Lauren. Use it. Clean access to my server. I've had my tech firm monitoring Graves' development since the trial. Grace looked up, startled. You've been watching them? Daniel didn't look at her. I told you I was done being a father. I didn't say I stopped being a strategist. Lauren's fingers flew across the screen, unlocking files Daniel's analysts had compiled. Surveillance footage. Shell company ledgers. Names of foreign investors hidden behind legal walls. But one thread stood out. She tapped the screen. Here. Krypton Black Logistics. They wire $6 million through an account every time one of Landon's subsidiaries buys land near defense assets. Cayman-based. Completely off-record, except. She zoomed in. A name appeared in the wire memo. Transfer requested by Grace V. Graves. Grace gasped. That's not mine. I never. Daniel stepped in front of her. Think, Grace. Did Landon ever ask you to sign something for tax reasons? Something urgent? Grace's mouth worked silently. Then she whispered, yes. A few times. He said we were restructuring to save on capital gains. Lauren exhaled slowly. Your digital signature is tied to an account funding foreign intelligence ops on you. Soil. Grace, if this explodes, you're the one holding the matchbook. Tears rolled down her cheeks. Oh my God. What do I do? Daniel's voice was low, deadly calm. You don't do anything. He turned the tablet around, clicked a secure line. A moment later, a man's face appeared, rugged, early 60s, one eye milky white from injury. Daniel, the man said. You're not calling for pleasantries. I'm activating it, Daniel said. Project Lighthouse. The man went still. You sure? Daniel nodded. We're going to flip the operation from the inside. Use Grace's trail as bait. And when they come for her, he glanced at his daughter, we'll be waiting. Lauren added, we burned them legally. No blood. No bodies. Just ruin, the kind they never recover from. The man on screen smiled. That's the Voss I remember. Daniel ended the call. Grace stared at both of them, pale. What? What is Project Lighthouse? Daniel turned to her, voice even. It's what I built when you erased me from your life. A network of ex-analysts, cyber forensics, and legal assassins. Not to get revenge, but to prepare for the day I'd have to protect myself from my own blood. The next morning, Grace woke up in her childhood bedroom unchanged since high school. The same cream-colored curtains. The same bookshelf, still full of novels she once pretended to read for her AP English teacher. But now it felt like a mausoleum of a life she no longer recognized. She stared at the ceiling, trying to steady her breath. In 24 hours, her entire world had shifted. Her father wasn't just a bitter old man. Lauren wasn't just a disgraced accountant, and she wasn't a victim anymore. She was an asset. Her bait. Downstairs, Daniel was already in the study, suited up like it was war. In a way, it was. Lauren was beside him, reviewing the logistics like a general counting troop movements. I activated a trace, Lauren said, pointing to Grace's tablet. You'll use that to send an innocuous email to Landon. Something simple. Say you've reactivated an old account and need to move money from the joint fund. That's the bait, Daniel chimed in. They'll check the IP. It'll ping from here on purpose. They'll assume you're vulnerable. Alone. They'll send someone to verify. Grace swallowed hard. What happens when they do? Daniel looked at her, not cruel, but without comfort. You'll answer the door. She flinched. He continued, your mistake 6 years ago was trusting the wrong person. You're going to fix that by making them trust you now. Grace nodded, slowly. And then, Lauren leaned in. Then you stall. You smile. You let them think you're still broken. Meanwhile, we gather what we need. A clean intercept, zero violence, and a federal case with a bow on it. Grace managed a half laugh. You make it sound so simple. It's not, Daniel said. But you owe us a performance. One good enough to finish what you helped destroy. The email went out at 10:32 a.m. By 2:17 p.m., a signal bounced from an encrypted satellite relay in the Philippines to a known shell server in Luxembourg. At 4:02 p.m., Daniel's servers flagged a network handshake from a familiar device, Landon's personal terminal. He was watching, and he wasn't alone. That night, Grace walked the garden path behind the house. The same path she'd used as a teenager to sneak in after curfew. Moonlight traced the hedges like silver veins. Her breath fogged in the cool air. Footsteps behind her. She turned casually. He was standing at the end of the path. Not Landon. Someone worse. His name was Nico Valdez, former intelligence contractor turned corporate fixer. He was the one Landon used when people needed quieting. Grace had met him once, years ago. Cold eyes. Unreadable face. He'd smiled at her like a man who preferred not to blink. Grace, he said, stepping into the light. You've been hard to find. Her stomach twisted, but her voice stayed calm. I had to get out. He left me. There's things you don't know. I know plenty, he replied. Starting with the fact you're sending emails from your father's house. She swallowed. It was stupid. I panicked. Nico tilted his head. Where's the old man? He wants nothing to do with me. I told him everything, and he threw me out. I've been sleeping in the guest house. Nico smiled, faint and predatory. You always were a survivor. Then he stepped forward. Landon's in trouble, Grace. And trouble spreads. We can clean this up, but I need access. Passwords. Files. Backups. You were his wife. Grace looked at the ground. I'll get them. He nodded. Do that. You have 48 hours. He turned and vanished into the trees like smoke. She exhaled, shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of telling just enough truth to sell the lie. Back inside, Lauren pulled the earpiece from Grace's collar. Daniel stood with arms folded, face like carved granite. Did we get him? Grace asked. Lauren tapped the receiver. Better. We got who Landon trusts to clean up after him. That's our entry point. Daniel walked to the fireplace, staring into the flames. The board's set. The knights moved. Now we go for the bishop. They came at 3:14 a.m. Not with violence, but with precision. 2 SUVs, blacked out, unmarked, parked half a mile down the private road that led to Daniel Voss's estate. No headlights. No noise. Just 2 men in tactical gear, and 1 woman with a headset and mirrored lenses. The cleaners. Not assassins. Not thugs. These were corporate ghosts, ex-FBI, ex-CIA, ex-everything. Their job wasn't to kill. It was to erase. Hard drives, security cameras, financial trails, and when needed, people. Inside the house, Daniel was already awake. He hadn't slept. He rarely did anymore. Men like him didn't need rest, just information, and time to move it. They're here, Lauren said, glancing at her tablet. The GPS tracker she planted on Nico's shoe pulsed on screen. 2 contractors, possibly a third staying with the car. Grace stood by the window, arms folded, her face pale. What are they looking for? Any sign you flipped, Daniel replied. Evidence, leverage, or loose ends. Lauren's voice sharpened. And we're going to give it to them. Grace turned, startled. What? Daniel tossed her a USB stick. That's a clone drive. It looks like Landon's personal archive, but it's rigged. When they plug it in, it activates a beacon. An invisible fingerprint in their own system. Grace's eyes widened. You're going to track them. More than that, Lauren said. Once we find the server they upload it to, we'll have access to their internal network. Names, payments, routes, even clients. Grace swallowed. And if they don't take the bait? Daniel's voice was granite. They will. Because they think you're weak. Downstairs, the cleaners moved with surgical calm. One disabled the hallway camera with a magnet pulse. The other scanned the study for heat signatures. The woman, the leader, stood in front of Daniel's wall safe. Encrypted, she said, slipping a flash module into the panel. Running brute force attack. They weren't expecting resistance. Which is why, when they opened the safe and found exactly what they came for, the USB, they didn't question it. Got the drive, the man said. Back to the car, the woman ordered. And just like that, gone. Daniel watched from the upper floor through a thermal lens. They didn't touch anything else. Professional. Lauren nodded. And predictable. At 4:37 a.m., the beacon triggered. Somewhere in Northern Virginia, a secure server received the cloned USB and ran its contents. Lauren's computer lit up like a Christmas tree. We're in, she whispered. The server was masked through layers of proxies, but Daniel's tech team was already working behind the curtain. Here, Lauren said. They're routing through a firm in Berlin, Virex Consulting. But the real IP traces to a private network in Reston, owned by a logistics shell called Krypton Black. Daniel's voice dropped. That's the same name from the Cayman wires. Grace stood behind them, stunned. Landon always said that was a freight company. Said they handled equipment shipping for the development sites. Lauren turned her screen. Freight, yes, but not legal. According to customs intercepts, Krypton Black has moved over $60 million in undeclared foreign equipment into U.S. ports in the last year alone, mostly to sites near military bases. Daniel's jaw clenched. And our federal friends? I already tagged our DOJ contact, Lauren said. But we can't sit back and wait. Grace's hands were shaking. What does this mean? Daniel turned to her calm, deliberate. It means your husband isn't running a scam anymore. He's part of an infiltration network, possibly foreign-backed. And we just traced their digital shadow to a building 30 minutes from Langley. He turned to Lauren. It's time we send a message. One they won't ignore. Later that morning, at a glass-walled office in Reston, a woman with a German accent received a small envelope delivered by courier. Inside was a single photograph. It showed her standing next to Landon Graves at a black tie fundraiser in Prague 3 years earlier, the same night she thought no photos had been taken. On the back, a message written in black ink. Your firewall is made of paper. Fold carefully. Lighthouse. She paled. Across town, Nico Valdez's phone vibrated once. A message with no sender ID. You're in our crosshairs now. Call your employer. And at the Voss estate, Grace stood in the garden watching the sunrise through damp leaves. They're going to retaliate, she whispered. Daniel stood beside her. Let them. We've drawn them into the light. They don't know yet, but they've already lost. The man's name was Elias Trenholm, but no one who paid him ever used it. To the clients who paid him in unmarked crypto and bearer bonds, he was known as the broker, a facilitator for operations that couldn't appear on ledgers, invoices, or newspaper headlines. Arms deals, corporate coups, data exfiltration, infiltration contracts disguised as infrastructure projects. And in this moment, the broker was not pleased. He stood alone in a high-rise suite overlooking Manhattan's financial district, scrolling through an encrypted file dump sent by his Berlin operative, the woman who had received the photo from Lighthouse. The note was chilling. The message impossible. He read it twice. Your firewall is made of paper. Fold carefully. That name, Lighthouse, hadn't surfaced in nearly a decade. A black market ghost protocol, created after September 11th by a rogue NSA strategist. It was rumored to be a revenge network, something built not by governments, but by victims of betrayal. The idea that it was still alive, or worse, active, was enough to stop funding cold. Elias placed a call. "Mr. Graves," he said when the line connected. Landon's voice was tight. Panicked. "I saw the message. I don't know how they traced the safe house." "You were sloppy," Elias interrupted. "You got comfortable with a girl who still had access to the only person dangerous enough to pull this off. You said Daniel Voss was a non-factor. And you said your wife was loyal." Landon went silent. Elias continued, his voice low and final. "Clean it. Kill the story. Kill the leak. I don't care if it's legal. Use fire, if you must. Just make it disappear." He ended the call. Back in New Hampshire, Daniel knew they were now being hunted. Lauren had picked up chatter on a darknet forum she monitored through a shell identity. A bounty, not for death, but for data. Whoever Lighthouse was, they were suddenly worth a small fortune. Grace read the messages aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "Acquire all digital assets. Surveillance, correspondence, legal filings, investigative tools. Payment, $1 million US. Bonus if Lighthouse ID is verified." Daniel folded his hands. "They're scared. And scared men overreach." Lauren nodded. "That's where we break them. Not with brute force, with panic." She opened her laptop. On screen, a map showed 6 nodes, known Graves development shell sites tied to the military zoning anomalies. One blinked in orange, the location of a recently acquired property in Charleston, South Carolina, next to a naval drone testing range. "We hit it next," she said. "But legally. We don't break in, we expose." Grace furrowed her brow. "How?" Lauren turned to Daniel. "It's time we use the one-person Landon can't bribe. Someone whose anger is still fresh." Daniel's eyes glinted. "You mean?" "Yes. Her name's Natalie Chin. She was a whistleblower at a subcontractor Graves crushed 3 years ago, lost her pension, her health insurance, everything. She filed suit. The case was dismissed. I stayed in touch." Daniel nodded once. "Get her on a plane." 2 days later, Natalie Chin stood in front of the Charleston City Council, holding up a copy of Graves Development's falsified zoning application. "I worked on the environmental impact review for that site," she said. "And this," she slapped the report, "is a forgery. The original report flagged the location as non-viable due to groundwater contamination and defense proximity. This version removes those pages." Cameras flashed. Lauren, watching from the back of the room, smiled. One seed planted. By that evening, a local news station had picked up the story. Military-adjacent project draws corruption allegations. Daniel poured himself a drink back at the estate, watching the broadcast as it looped. Grace sat nearby, stunned. "You're going to destroy them, without firing a shot." Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. "That's the point. Let them burn down their own fortress trying to kill a shadow." Lauren's phone buzzed. She checked the message and went still. Daniel saw it immediately. "What is it?" She turned the screen. A photo had been texted to her from a burner account. Grace stood at a street corner. From earlier that afternoon. Someone had been watching. Under it. "You can run the lighthouse, but you can't stop the tide." Grace's face drained of color. "They're here," she whispered. Daniel looked out the window. His voice was calm. "Then let's bring them in." The men came quietly. They always did. 3 unmarked SUVs rolled past the outer fence line of Daniel Voss's property under the cover of darkness, their headlights blacked out, thermal camouflage blankets tucked beneath their seats in case things got noisy. The driver of the lead vehicle was Nico Valdez, methodical, unsmiling, and carrying a suppressed firearm tucked beneath his jacket. But this wasn't a hit. This was containment. "You're sure she's here?" one of the operatives asked Nico. "She sent the email. Ping twice from this location," he replied. "Lighthouse is here. Somewhere inside." Back at the estate, Daniel had already killed the main lights. The house now sat in calculated silence, not panicked, but prepared, like a fortress pretending to sleep. Grace paced the foyer, the anxiety growing like a weight around her neck. What happens if they get in? Daniel didn't answer immediately. He slipped on a dark sport coat and earpiece, his demeanor as still as stone. Lauren was in the basement server room, her fingers dancing across the keys. "They're trying to breach the Wi-Fi. I've spoofed 2 dummy routers and fed them malware-laced packet headers. If they access them, their own comms will start bleeding location data." Daniel turned to Grace. "We don't stop them from getting in. We want them inside." Grace blinked. "Why?" "Because once they enter my house, they've committed federal trespass. We record it, document it, trace it, and use it to pull their entire operation into the daylight. Won't they realize that? Daniel smiled faintly. They think we're still trying to survive. They haven't figured out we're winning. At 1:16 a.m., Nico's team split into 2 units. One approached the rear garden using thermal optics. The other advanced toward the front entrance, scanning for motion detectors. What they didn't know, every movement was being recorded in 4K, stored to a satellite-linked cloud server Lauren had activated 30 minutes prior. In the basement, she whispered into her mic, "Front team just crossed threshold." One touched the door frame. Got his fingerprint. I'll get an ID within the hour. In the living room, Daniel stood with Grace in the dark, waiting. The moment came in the form of a soft click, the unmistakable sound of the door latch being tripped. They were in. Nico swept the entryway, eyes alert. No lights. No sound. He signaled with 2 fingers, upstairs. One operative headed up. The other turned toward the den. And then a click. The sound of a relay switch. The house came alive. Lights. Sirens. Digital screens blinking across the walls. Every inch of their entry displayed back to them in real time. Their own faces. Their movements. The voice that echoed through the speaker system was Lawrence. "Smile for the federal database, gentlemen. You've just walked into an active surveillance trap." The front door slammed shut. Electronically sealed. The rear exit followed. Steel plates dropped over the windows, silent lockdown mode. "Fall back. Fall back." One man shouted, pulling at the door. Too late. Daniel stepped from the shadows, calm and deliberate. "I'd ask you to stay," he said, "but you've already made yourselves at home." Nico cursed under his breath. "Voss. You're not hard to track, Nico. Even a ghost leaves prints when he gets desperate." From the stairwell came the sound of thudding boots. Local law enforcement, pre-alerted by a coded trigger Lauren had installed into the breaker box. Officers stormed in with body cams, shouting commands. Nico and his crew didn't resist. They weren't that stupid, but their eyes betrayed everything. They thought this was about Grace. They still didn't understand. They were just the outer ring. Daniel stepped forward as Nico was handcuffed. "You want to talk immunity?" he asked. "Then talk fast. Because your handler's about to vanish the moment he hears you've been compromised." Nico glared. "You don't have enough leverage." Lauren's voice came over Daniel's earpiece. "Actually, we do. The malware worked. I have access to their internal comms log. Guess who's listed as their point of payment?" She sent the file to Daniel's tablet. He turned the screen. Nico's face finally changed. Daniel smiled. "Hello, Elias Trenholm." By dawn, the house was calm again. The steel shutters lifted. The servers cooled. The air returned to stillness. Grace stood beside her father on the balcony, watching the police cars drive away. "I thought I'd feel relief," she said. "But I just feel tired." Daniel nodded. "Because now you know how the real world works. Winning doesn't feel like fireworks. It feels like surviving longer than the ones who wanted to destroy you." Lauren appeared in the doorway. "They're flipping, one by one," she said. "Nico gave us everything, drop locations, ghost accounts, even Elias's travel logs. With this, we don't just dismantle Graves' development." Daniel looked up. "We collapsed the entire network." Lauren's smile was faint, but lethal. "It's time to take it public."